the federal government has justified its inability to generate the promised target of 5,000 megawatts of electricity for the country. Minister of Power Abubakar Aliyu said the electricity workers' demand is labor-related and that it will be resolved sooner rather than later. Arise News State House correspondent Adesuwa Omorwan filed this report.
With members of the National Union of Electricity Employees and their counterparts in the Senior Staff Association of Electricity and Allied Companies picketing the offices of Transmission Company of Nigeria nationwide, shutting down operations at the power stations and embarking on an indefinite strike before calling off the industrial action after government intervention. There had been concerns of an already erratic electricity supply in the country getting worse. The Minister of Power, while speaking after the Federal Executive Council meeting, says the demands of the workers have nothing to do with his ministry, but are labor-related, and that the government was acting fast to resolve the issues.
The issues they have is not particularly on having something to do with us, but together with something to do with employment issues with the head of service, and so that's the reason why they are now having that discussions. And I believe maybe by now they must have settled, or they have gone far on the discussion.
He also addressed the recent drop in power generation, attributing it to gas supply issues.
Yesterday evening, we had a generation of over 4,000, around 4,600 megawatts. And you know, we told you since 1st of July that we'll be able to raise it up to 5,000 when we activated the contract.
We're now being joined by lawyer, social entrepreneur, and executive director, Citizens Advocacy for Social and Economic Rights, Frank Tietie. Welcome to the program, Frank Tietie. Thank you for joining us. Quickly, you issued a statement.
Thank you. Thank you, and my pleasure.
Yeah, you issued a statement a few days ago following the strike by electricity workers. That was on August 17, saying that within the light of Section 31, Subsection 6 of the Trade Unions Act, that the decision of the electricity workers and the senior staff of the Allied and Electricity Workers Association to shut down the national grid was a criminal act, was an act of terrorism, and that the Attorney General of the Federation should have immediately proceeded against them and filed charges against them. Why do you say so? Because some other stakeholders in that body say that they have a case and that they didn't just go on strike. They served notice as far back as May 18, 2022.
Well, thank you very much, Doctor. You know, it's not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of law and fact. And the law, there's always a reason. There's always a basis for law, which is a utilitarian value. So Section 31, Subsection 6 of the Trade Union Act, if you remember, that was it was an amendment of the Trade Union Act as a result of when Adams Oshomole, as NLC president, virtually held the government of Chief Olusegun Obasanjo to ransom. And the National Assembly saw and realized the immense power of trade unions to actually being able to bring down a government if it chooses to. Now, there are what we refer to as essential services, not only by the definition of Nigerian law, whether Trade Dispute Act or the Trade Union Act, but even ILO provisions which trade unionists often refer to. Essential services, the provision of water, the provision of electricity, the provision of health services, the provision of security, and the provision of mortuary services. A whole lot of services that are referred to as essential services. And in Nigeria, by our law, there is a reason why the National Assembly made it made it mandatory and made it a matter of no negotiation that once you are a provider, a worker providing essential services, no matter how genuine, no matter how justifiable is your demand, you cannot embark on strike. That's certain. So certain strikes, no matter, irrespective of, in fact, they cannot even be contemplated. Just as it is if you are in the military or you are in the police, you cannot. It amounts to, it amounts to a near treason to embark on strike if you are working in those essential services sector. Now, what the electricity workers did was horrible, but it's not their fault. It's actually the fault of successive governments before this government that have failed to muster enough political will to be able to enforce our labor standards. And it's the same problem we just talked about with regards to ASU. The law in the same Trade Dispute Act in section 43, subsection 1, states that you cannot, if you don't work, you cannot expect pay. The no work, no pay principle is a principle of law, not a conjecture, not an opinion. The idea of no pay, no work is strange. It does not have a basis. Now, for many years, we've been reminding the government, set these standards, and particularly the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation that owes a serious constitutional duty to enforce legal standards in this country. But they often secretly kowtow to the power of unions not to dare to enforce the standards. And you see, it will always be a perennial problem for this administration and for the coming one if these standards are not enforced. Going back to the issue of electricity union workers, how dare you, when Section 1 of the Terrorism Prevention Act states that you cannot do anything that will amount to putting a government of a country, particularly the government of Nigeria or an international organization, under threat by coercion, under it doesn't matter whether you think about it or you take steps towards making the government to frustrate the existence of the government. Now, what is particularly under Section C of that section, subsection C of that Section 1, it states that attempts to prevent, to shut down the water and power all amount to acts of terrorism, and especially when they are done to coerce a government to doing a thing or not to do a thing. And that's exactly what the electricity union workers have done. Now, let us not even go to the high cost, the implications of shutting that power for the generality of the Nigerian people or the economy. Let's not go there. Let's look at the law. Now, you deliberately, aforethought, with threats, demanding for a particular thing to be done, you go and switch off the lights of an entire country. Where is it done? Now, what's different? And then the good thing is that the Terrorism Act says if you stop work, may not be terrorism. But however, if you stop work for the purpose of coercing a government, you are a terrorist. You are placed in the same category with Boko Haram. And then imagine, again, I use that example, that the Nigerian army at this time, that Nigeria is facing an intractable insecurity situation, the Nigerian army goes on strike. The Nigerian police goes on strike. How do you bring down a country? How do you destroy a country? Other than that. So you see that oftentimes we are our own enemies in this country. We have strikes that are often declared illegal by the law, have not been legalized because we have an attorney general with much respect to him. He's a fantastic lawyer, a senior advocate of Nigeria, but he's not only the one. Whether it was Bayo Joe, all of them, they've been in this track of playing the ostrich with regards to legal standards in labor law. And we'll continue to have this problem.
Frank Tietie, Joe Ajero was on another program on this station, The Morning Show, where he made it very clear that he's not afraid of anybody arresting him or detaining him because the NUEE, of which is the Secretary General, served notice and that they have very serious grounds for going on strike. And now that strike has been suspended for 2 weeks on the condition that government acts in good faith. What's your reaction to those issues that they have raised? One, that they serve notice, nobody listened to them. Two, that there is the stigmatization of electricity workers under the TCN by the Office of the Head of Service of the Federation. Two, that they are being forced to take promotion examination. Staff within the grade of principal managers seeking to become AGM, contrary to, agreement that such will not happen. And third, that arrears of electricity workers in terms of their salaries have not been paid. What do you say to those issues? Or you think that they are immaterial?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. They are not immaterial. These are not the best of times for anybody in this country, working in any sector in this country, whether in power, health, education, what you just name it. These are not the best of times for us. We're in a country going through the doldrums at this time. Again, for a country to survive a period such as this, we have to set standards. Joe Ajaero is actually constituting a huge threat to national security when he makes such statement. He's not alone. There are several of them who work in the, who are union leaders who don't actually understand that you don't build a country with this belligerent atmosphere you create. Whether it is being done by people carrying arms or those who are like him, who have the force of being able to stop essential services. That is a very terrible thing to do. This is nothing but attempting to sabotage a country. It's not his fault. It's because the standards are not there. So in one clear way, in one manner, I will just tell you that, yes, the law, the contemplation of the law, again, it's by section 31, subsection 6, is that, yes, there will be problems in terms of industrial relations between worker and employers. However, you don't go on strike in a fragile economy like this. So strike, the position of strike is, yes, there are positions for going on. I mean, there are provisions for going on strike. There are also procedures. It's not just by giving notices. The Minister of Labour has a very principal role to play. The Industrial Arbitration Panel has a role to play. And ultimately, the National Industrial Court has a role to play in finally declaring whether you are entitled to go to strike or not. But you see, it's not a problem for the National Industrial Court to declare whether or not you can go on strike because of the provisions of the law that declares that once you are providing essential services, forget about it. No matter how oppressed you are, unfortunately, sadly, which is a problem, which is a political problem. And I don't want to speak more about that. A political problem should have a political solution. That is the reason why you have a party such as the Labour Party. When you find the party in government not doing what it's supposed to do, well, you try to now apply political solutions, not by taking the way of least resistance, which is simply, applying the force, very brutal force that you have, which is to stop services and then to bring a government down. In that case, you are becoming an alternative to government. You are becoming more powerful than government. You can, in fact, bring down a government. And you don't know the implications of not having a government. And an anarchical situation is not what Nigeria can contain at this time. And these are the things that Joe Ajaero and the rest of the union, including ASU, these are the things that they are doing, and it is risky. I mean, they should think back. This is not different from the kind of civil war situation we have, except that in the words of J.P. Clark, caught in clash of counterclaims and charges, which is a reflection of the real belligerent nature which these union leaders are doing to this government. Unfortunately, we don't have a government that has a political will. It has been like that before. We are hoping that there is going to be a change so that union leaders can realize that they need to operate and exercise their very, very big power within the confines of the law, or else they will destroy this country.
Frank Tietie, unionists will tell you that a worker deserves his wages. And there is something called the principle of collective bargaining. But government doesn't want to bargain. Government goes about begging without doing the right thing. That's the flip side of the argument. But your group, KESA, is threatening to go to court to seek an order of mandamus to compel the Attorney General of the Federation to commence criminal proceedings against Joe Ajaero and co. Are you still going to go to court, or you think that the matter will be resolved in 2 weeks?
Yes, indeed.
Briefly.
Simple, very simple. Yes, indeed. The reason is that I have been to court against the Minister of Education before now. I've been to court against the National Association of Resident Doctors. I've been to court against Johesu, saying that, asking the court to force them to comply with the legal standards. The court refused, saying that I don't have sufficient interest. That's the reason why the only person who should have sufficient interest is the Attorney General. So we have informed the Attorney General, do your job, sir. If you don't do it, we will force you to do your job, whether according to Section 150 of the Constitution or according to Section 174 of the Constitution. You have the power. You have to act in the public interest. You don't have to allow powerful trade unions bring down this country as if it is being invaded by an enemy force. That's what is going to happen. We've seen into it. If this continues, all the unions have now seen how lucrative strike actions are. You go to strike for 6 months, and then you come, you demand whatever you demand, you get, and then when you haven't gotten it, you now say, okay, for the time I didn't work, pay me. The government begs them. The government is afraid of them. It ought not to be so. Why should I have a Nigerian government that will be subject to another union, which means Nigeria is losing sovereignty? I cannot, with all of the understanding of jurisprudence and law that I have, allow this kind of thing happen. No, somebody must tell both the government and these unionists that even though we don't have we're not on anybody's side, we cannot accept this. You don't bring down a country like this and then tell me that this is the only country I have. Well, we will go to court if the Attorney General does not do the right thing, so that we can put an end to this embarrassing imbroglio that keeps haunting Nigerians and the government.
Thank you very much, Frank Tietie, for joining us. That's one side of the coin. There's another side that, Joe Ajero and others are pushing. But thank you for joining us on this Day Live, this Sunday Talk Show.